We are going to discuss now the rules of sequences. For every given sequence, we need to state a rule and determine the next two terms. Let us start with this sequence. Given the first five terms, 42, 39, 36, 33, and 30. Take a look at the first two terms, which are 42 and 39. As you can see, we need to subtract 3 from 42 to get 39. In order to get 36, we need to subtract 3 from 39. To get 33, we need to subtract 3 from 36. And in order to get 30, we need to subtract 3 from 33. As you can see, we are subtracting the same number from a term in order to get the next term. With this, we can say now that the rule of this sequence is to start with 42 because 42 is the first term and subtract 3 from a term to get the next term. Another rule of this sequence is to start with 42 and add negative 3 to a term to get the next term. Now let us determine the next two terms. So the last given term of this sequence is 30. So 30 minus 3 is 27, and 27 minus 3 is 24. So these are the next two terms of the sequence. Let us proceed to the next example. Given negative 22, negative 18, negative 14, negative 10, and negative 6. Now looking at the first two terms, negative 22 and negative 18, we need to add 4 to negative 22 to get negative 18. Now remember the rule in adding integers having unlike signs. Subtract their absolute values and copy the sign of the integer with a greater absolute value. That is why negative 22 plus 4 is equal to negative 18. Now let us proceed to the next term. In order to get negative 14, we need to add 4 to negative 18. To get negative 10, we need to add 4 to negative 14. And in order to get negative 6, we need to add 4 to negative 10. So as you can see, again, we are adding the same number to a term to get the next term. So we can say now that the rule here is to start with, of course, the first term, which is 22, negative 22 I mean, and add 4 to a term to get the next term. So another rule of this sequence is to start with negative 22 and subtract negative 4 from a term to get the next term. So those are the opposite of your addition and positive 4. So now let us get the next two terms. The last given term here is negative 6. So negative 6 plus 4 is negative 22. I mean negative 2. And negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. Now the next two terms of the sequence are negative 2 and positive 2. Let us proceed to the third example. 256, 128, 64, 32, and 16. So, using the first two terms, we have 256 and 128. So, you need to subtract 128 from 256 in order to get 128, and then 64 from 128 to to get 64, and then 32 from 64 to get 32, and 16 from 32 to get 16. Now, we have a problem here. We are not subtracting the same number from a term to get the next term. But look at this. The difference between 256 and 128 is the same with the next term. Between 128 and 64, the difference is 64. So what can you conclude now? Yes, we are going to divide the term by 2 to get the next term. So 256 divided by 2 will give us 128. Then 128 divided by 2 is 64. 64 divided by 2 is 32. And 32 divided by 2 is 16. So here, we are already using the same number to get the next term. So we can conclude now our rule here is to start with, of course, the first term, which is 256, and divide the term or the preceding term divide a term by 2 to get the next term. Another rule is the opposite of division and the reciprocal of 2, using the opposite of division and reciprocal of 2, which is multiply by 1/2. So another rule here is to start with 256 and multiply a term or the term by 1/2 to get the next term. Now let us determine the next two terms. The last given term is 16. So 16 divided by 2 will give us 8. Or 16 times 1/2 will give us also 8. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now let us proceed to the last example. Oh, very easy, right? We have negative 1, 1, negative 1, 1, negative 1. I know that you already know the answer. So the signs, we only have one number, but with different signs. Now let us discuss how to get the next term. Now from negative 1, we need to multiply it by negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 will give us positive 1. Positive 1 times negative 1 will give us negative 1, and so on and so forth. So from here, we can already conclude that the rule is to start with negative 1 and multiply or divide. Anyway, it will give us the same answer. Multiply the term by negative 1 to get the next term. So let us determine the next two terms. So we have 1 and negative 1.